I'm Leah Carter. I'm 32 years old. I'm an Army sergeant, and I'm a widow. I had just lost my husband. Returning to Pennsylvania after a voluntary deployment to escape the agony of Michael's death, I never imagined I'd walk into a different kind of hell. The house was freezing, colder than the winter air outside, and it reeked of death. My mother-in-law and brother-in-law had drained every last cent of the death gratuity, the blood money Michael left behind, to book a luxury cruise. They turned off the heat, leaving my father-in-law, Arthur, a terminally ill veteran, to waste away in his own filth. Even crueler, they'd swapped his painkillers for tap water to save a few bucks. They figured with Michael gone, no one would protect this useless old man. But they were wrong. They didn't know that Arthur was sitting on a secret worth $2 million, and he had just handed me the detonator to that bomb. Let justice be served. If you believe that karma always comes on time, subscribe now to witness a soldier teach some grifters a lesson they'll never forget. The windshield wipers fought a losing battle against the Pennsylvania snow. It was a thick, wet slush that smeared across the glass, blurring the outside world into a gray and white smudge. My knuckles were white on the truck's steering wheel. My shoulders were knotted with a tension that had nothing to do with the road conditions. I reached my right hand over to the passenger seat. It was a reflex, a muscle memory etched into me over 7 years of marriage. My fingers brushed against the cold leather, expecting the warmth of a hand, the rough texture of a jacket sleeve. Nothing, just empty space. I snatched my hand back as if I'd been burned, and the grief washed over me in a fresh wave. Michael was gone. 8 months. My brain still hadn't rewired itself to accept the silence of the cab, which was why I had volunteered to deploy right after the funeral. I needed the noise, the orders, the exhaustion of the army to drown out the quiet. But now I was back in the house we'd bought with his parents so we could help care for Arthur, back in the place that was supposed to be a sanctuary. I just wanted warmth. I wanted to walk into a house that smelled like pot roast or coffee, hear the hum of the furnace, sit in front of the fireplace, and try to figure out how to be a widow at 32. I pulled into the driveway. The house was dark. Not the cozy, people are sleeping dark, but an empty, abandoned dark. The snow in the driveway hadn't been shoveled. It was packed down into ice, which meant no one had come or gone in days. I unlocked the front door and stepped inside. I froze. The air in the foyer wasn't just cool, it was sharp. I breathed out, and a cloud of white mist formed in front of my face. I pulled my coat tighter, confused. The thermostat on the wall to my left read 40 degrees. Why would they turn the heat off in the middle of a blizzard? Sharon, Kevin, I called out. My voice echoed flat and unanswered. I walked into the living room, leaving wet footprints on the hardwood. That's when I saw it. The fireplace was cold, a great gaping void, but above it on the mantel was the triangular case holding the American flag that had draped Michael's coffin. It was right where I'd left it, but it was gray. A thick, fuzzy layer of dust coated the glass and the wooden frame. A tightness seized my chest. They hadn't just ignored it, they had treated it like an old piece of furniture, an unwanted piece of junk collecting dust. The disrespect burned hot and acidic in my throat. Michael had died serving this country, and his own mother couldn't be bothered to dust his flag. Then the smell hit me. It was faint at first, masked by the frigid cold, but as I made my way to the back hallway where Arthur's room was, it assaulted me. The thick, acrid reek of ammonia, urine, feces, and something else, something sweeter, heavier, the smell of rotting sickness. Arthur, I pushed the door to the study open. It was glacial. The blinds were drawn, plunging it into near-total darkness. I fumbled for the light switch, bathing the room in a blinding fluorescent glare. I gasped, my hand flying to my mouth. Arthur Miller, the man who had been a second father to Michael, a proud Vietnam veteran who used to carry logs on his shoulders like they were twigs, was a skeleton. He was curled in a fetal position in the hospital bed we'd set up for him. The sheets were stained dark yellow and brown. He was shaking so violently that the metal bed frame rattled. He was lying in his own waste. I rushed to his side, dropping my duffel bag. Arthur, oh my God, Arthur, I'm here. His skin was paper thin and ice cold to the touch. His eyes were closed, sunken into his skull. He didn't seem to hear me. He was delirious. his head knocking weakly against the soiled pillow. "Michael," he rasped, a dry, cracking whisper. "Michael, help me. It's so cold." My late husband's name, spoken by this dying man, shattered me. Arthur didn't know. In his fever, in his agony, he was calling for the one person who had ever truly protected him. And Michael was gone. "I'm here, Dad. I'm here," I choked out, my eyes stinging with tears. "I'm going to get you warm, I promise." I shrugged off my heavy coat and draped it over him, tucking it around his trembling shoulders. I needed water, I needed towels, I needed to kill whoever did this to him. I ran to the kitchen, my boots thudding on the linoleum. The house was so quiet, so empty. Where were they? Sharon wouldn't just leave him. She was obsessed with appearances. She wouldn't let the neighbors think she was neglecting her husband. I grabbed a bowl from the counter to fill with water, and then I saw the refrigerator. A magnet was holding a scrap of lined paper at eye level. It was a cheap plastic magnet shaped like a banana with a goofy face on it. It looked ridiculous against the stainless steel. I recognized the handwriting instantly. It was Kevin's. Lazy, slanted, careless. I tore the paper from the fridge. My hands were shaking so badly the paper rattled. "Hey, if you're reading this, you're back. Good, you can deal with the old man. Mom and I needed a break. This last year has been a nightmare with all the Michael drama, and we needed to unwind. We booked a suite on Royal Caribbean. Don't call us. The roaming charges are insane. We'll be back in 2 weeks. Keep him alive till we get back, or don't, whatever. Kevin and Mom." I stared at the note. All the Michael drama. That's what they called my husband's death. That's what they called burying a son and a brother. Drama. A raw, primitive scream built in my chest. They were on a cruise. They were sipping cocktails and eating from buffets in the tropics, soaking up the sun, while they let a war veteran with cancer freeze to death in his own excrement in Pennsylvania. I looked at the banana magnet, grinning its stupid plastic grin at me. I looked at the words Royal Caribbean. I crushed the paper in my fist, squeezing it until my nails dug into my palm. The grief that had weighed me down for 8 months evaporated. In its place, something else ignited. It wasn't pain anymore. It was a cold, hard, military-grade fury. I wasn't just a grieving widow in a cold house anymore. I was a sergeant, and I had just identified the enemy. I filled a large bowl with water from the kettle I'd just boiled. The tap water was ice cold, and the water heater seemed to be on its last legs, struggling to push anything lukewarm through the pipes. I tested it with my elbow, just like they taught us in basic first aid, like a mother would for a baby. It needed to be warm enough to counter the chill in the room, but gentle enough for skin that looked like parchment paper. Back in the study, the smell hit me again, but I pushed through it. I set the basin on the nightstand and pulled a clean washcloth from the linen closet, one of the few things Sharon hadn't packed up or sold. "Easy, Arthur," I whispered, pulling back the soiled sheets from his trembling frame. "I've got you. We're going to get you cleaned up." He was barely conscious, but as the warm, damp cloth touched his chest, his eyes flew open. Confusion gave way to realization, and then, instantly, to horror. He tried to pull away, to cover himself with hands too weak to lift. "Leah," he moaned, a sound that came from deep in his throat. Tears leaked from the corners of his eyes, sliding through the gray stubble on his cheeks. "Leah, no, please, not you." It broke my heart. This man had been a vibrant, strong carpenter. He had built the back deck on this house with his bare hands. He'd served in Vietnam, trekking through jungles, surviving things most people couldn't imagine. And now he was crying because his daughter-in-law had to clean him like a baby. "Shh," I soothed him, keeping my voice steady and matter-of-fact, not stopping my work. I knew if I hesitated, I'd make it worse. "It's just a body, Arthur. It's just dirt. We'll get rid of it. You're Michael's dad. That makes you my dad. And dads take care of kids, and kids take care of dads. That's the deal." He squeezed his eyes shut. He turned his head to the wall, his chest hitching with silent sobs. As I worked, rinsing the cloth and wringing it out, A quote from Mother Teresa floated into my mind. Something I'd read years ago and never fully understood until this very moment, in this freezing room. The most terrible poverty is loneliness, and the feeling of being unloved. Arthur wasn't poor because of a lack of money. He was poor because the people who were supposed to love him had treated him like trash to be thrown away. My mind drifted back, pulled by the gravity of grief, to the day we buried Michael. It was raining that day too, a cold, miserable drizzle that soaked everything. We were at the cemetery, standing around the open grave. The honor guard was there, stiff and perfect in their dress uniforms. The bugler had just started to play taps. I was falling apart. I couldn't breathe. My knees were shaking, and I was clinging to Michael's casket like it was the only thing holding me to the earth. I was sobbing loudly, horribly, gasping for air, and then I felt a sharp pinch on my arm. "Leah, stop it," Sharon hissed in my ear. I looked at her through blurry vision. She was immaculate. She wore a designer black dress that probably cost more than my first car and a wide-brimmed hat to cut a silhouette. She was holding a large black umbrella, angled not to shield me but to protect herself from the rain. "You're making a scene," she whispered, her voice venomous. "Look at your face. Your mascara is running. You're a mess. Pull yourself together. The photographer is trying to get a family shot and you're a disaster." I stared at her, stunned. Her son was in a box 5 feet away, and she was worried about her mascara and the photo for her Facebook page. I looked over at Arthur. He wasn't under an umbrella. He was standing 5 feet away, completely exposed to the rain. Water dripped from his nose, soaking his suit, plastering his white hair to his skull. He wasn't looking at the camera, he wasn't looking at Sharon, he was staring at the flag-draped casket, keeping his back straight despite the cancer already eating at his bones. He raised his hand in a slow, trembling salute. He stood there for the entire ceremony, shaking with cold and grief, honoring the boy he had raised since he was 4 years old. He didn't care about his shoes or his suit. He was losing a piece of his soul. That was the difference. Sharon loved the attention Michael brought her. Arthur loved Michael. "Leah." The weak voice brought me back to the present. The water in the bowl was getting cold. Arthur was clean now, dressed in a fresh flannel pajama top I'd found in the back of a drawer. I had wrapped him in 2 thick wool blankets. He was looking at me, his gray eyes clearer than when I arrived. He looked exhausted, his face gaunt and his skin waxy. "I'm right here, Arthur," I said, sitting on the edge of the bed and taking his hand. It was like holding a bundle of twigs. "Feeling any better?" He didn't answer my question. Instead, he frowned with the effort. He squeezed my hand, a squeeze so faint it felt like the brush of a ghost. "You look thin," he whispered hoarsely. "Have you eaten, honey? Michael would be so mad if he saw you this skinny." The breath left my body. Here he was, dying, starved, dehydrated, abandoned in a freezing house by his wife and stepson. He had just gone through the humiliation of being bathed, and the first coherent thought his brain could form was not a complaint about his pain, not a plea for water. It was concern for me. He was worried I hadn't had lunch. The contrast between this dying old man and the monsters on that cruise ship was so stark it was physically painful. Sharon and Kevin were probably gorging themselves on shrimp cocktails and steak right now, using Michael's death money, while the man who actually loved Michael was lying here worrying about my appetite. Tears pricked my eyes again, but they weren't tears of grief. They were tears of fierce, protective love. "I'm okay, Dad," I choked out, using the title I knew he cherished. "I'll eat. But first we need to get some fluids in you." If you believe real family isn't defined by blood, but by who stays when things get hard, hit the like button right now. It helps me. Share Arthur's story and comment true love below if you're on our side in this fight. I watched as his eyes started to drift shut again, the effort of talking draining his energy. He looked peaceful for the first time since I'd walked in, secure in the knowledge that he wasn't alone. I sat there in the silence, listening to the wind howl outside and the slow, shallow rhythm of his breathing. I didn't want to move. I didn't want to let go of his hand. But as I sat in the quiet, a sudden harsh blue light lit up the dim corner. My phone, which was on the nightstand where I'd tossed it, had lit up. It wasn't a call, it was a notification, and then another, and another. I gently released Arthur's hand and picked up the device. The screen glowed against my face in the cold, artificial dark. I unlocked it, and the icons for my banking app stared back at me. I took a deep breath. It was time to see exactly how much damage they had done. The blue light from the smartphone screen cut through the study's gloom like a laser, burning my tired eyes. I sat on the edge of Arthur's bed. The silence of the freezing house pressed in on my eardrums. Outside, the wind whipped at the siding, but inside, the only movement was the rhythmic rise and fall of the old man's chest under the pile of blankets I'd gathered. My thumb hovered over the notification. It was from Instagram. Ashley. Ashley was Kevin's girlfriend, a 24-year-old aspiring influencer who hadn't worked a day in her life. She was the kind of person who saw funerals as networking events and tragedies as content opportunities. I tapped the icon, the app loaded, and a photo filled the screen. It was so bright and colorful it looked like a hallucination compared to the gray misery of Pennsylvania in winter. It was a selfie. Ashley was beaming, her teeth a blinding white, her skin tanned a deep, artificial bronze. She was wearing a neon pink bikini top that barely contained her chest and huge designer sunglasses that reflected a turquoise ocean. Behind her was the unmistakable white railing of a cruise ship deck, framing a view of crystal-clear water and a lush island in the distance. In one hand, she held a tropical cocktail, something orange with a paper umbrella and a pineapple wedge. On her other arm, slung casually as if she belonged there, was a brand-new Gucci Marmont shoulder bag, the black leather one with the gold double G. I knew exactly how much that bag cost because I'd seen her drooling over it in magazines. $2. But it was the caption that made the bile rise in my throat. Living my best life in the Bahamas. Taught my man how to play blackjack last night and we won big money, haha. So needed this self-care trip after such a toxic year. Special thanks to my brother-in-law for sponsoring this heavenly getaway. Vacation mode. Royal Kingdom, new Gucci. Blessed her life insurance. Thanks, Michael. I sucked in a sharp breath. I read it again. Life, insurance, thanks. Michael. My hands started to shake, a fine, high-frequency tremor that made the phone case vibrate. She had actually tagged him. She had tagged my dead husband, a soldier who died in a dusty, God-forsaken village on the other side of the world, in a post about her drinking Mai Tais and buying designer handbags, sponsoring this getaway. A deep chill settled in my stomach, one colder and darker than the grief I carried daily. I minimized Instagram and found the folder where I kept my financial apps. Before I left for my voluntary deployment, I had made a decision, a stupid, trusting, naive decision. I had added Kevin as an authorized user on the main checking account, the same one where Michael's SGLI payment, the service members group life insurance, had been deposited. $400, $400. That money was supposed to be the safety net. It was supposed to pay for Arthur's hospice care, his medications, and his funeral when the time came. It was supposed to pay the mortgage on the house so Arthur wouldn't be homeless. I trusted Kevin. He was Michael's brother. He was lazy, yes, and entitled, but I never thought he was a monster. I thought he'd buy groceries, maybe pay the electric bill. I tapped the bank app icon. The Face ID wheel spun for a second that felt like an eternity. Authenticating. Login successful. The dashboard loaded. I stared at the numbers. I blinked, sure my eyes were playing tricks on me in the dark. I wiped the screen with my thumb. Available balance. $12.45. The air left the room. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. No, that wasn't possible. There was over $400 in there 8 months ago. I tapped the transaction history. The list populated, scrolling down and down. It was a hemorrhage, a financial slaughter. Royal Caribbean NV, $8.800. 00. ATM withdrawal, Casino, Nassau, 500. 00. ATM withdrawal, Casino, Nassau, 500. 00. Atlantis Resort and Casino, $10, $1, and is it 0. Gucci duty free, $2, $500, is it 0. Carnival Spa and Salon, $850, 0. Liquor World, Fort Lauderdale, $475. 21, Ford dealership, $65,000, 0. A new truck for Kevin, Nordstrom, $200, 0. Apple Store, $300. 00. Cash withdrawal, $500. 0. They hadn't just dipped into the pot, they had emptied it. They had scraped the bottom of the barrel. That money was Michael. I closed my eyes and I saw him. I saw Michael coming home from training, covered in mud, exhausted, his boots worn through. I saw him signing the SGLI paperwork at the kitchen table, his face serious. "If something happens to me, Leah," he had said, "I want to make sure you and Dad are okay. I don't want you to worry about money." That money was his sacrifice. It was the value the government put on his life. Every single dollar in that account represented a drop of his blood, a minute of his fear, a piece of his future that he never got to live. And they were drinking it, wearing it as handbags, gambling it away in slot machines in the Bahamas, having it massaged into their skin at a luxury spa. They were eating my husband. A sound escaped my throat. A low, animalistic growl I didn't recognize as my own. My vision turned hazy. The white light of the phone screen swam into a red mist. The audacity, the cruelty, the pure, unadulterated evil of hashtagging life insurance while Arthur lay there in the dark, shivering under a coat because they were too cheap to pay the gas bill. They let Arthur sit in his own filth to save money on diapers, but they dropped $10,000 at a casino in one night. The rage hit me like a physical blow, more intense and violent than anything I had ever felt in combat. My skin felt like it was on fire. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. All I could feel was the weight of the phone in my hand, the portal to their sick, twisted joy. I stood up. My knees were shaking so badly I almost fell. I looked at the screen one last time, at Ashley's empty, smiling face mocking everything Michael had died for. "Parasites," I whispered through gritted teeth. I drew my arm back and I threw the phone across the room with all my strength. It flew through the darkness like a missile and smashed against the drywall opposite the bed. Crack. The sound was explosive in the silent house. The screen shattered, raining glass fragments on the floor, and the light, finally, thankfully, was extinguished into blackness. The sound of the iPhone hitting the drywall echoed like a gunshot. A violent crack that seemed to suck the oxygen out of the room. For a split second, there was absolute silence. Then the screaming started. It wasn't from me, it was from the bed. The sudden noise had startled Arthur awake, jolting him from his fragile, exhausted sleep. The jarring movement must have twisted his spine, setting off the bone cancer that had been eating away at his vertebrae for months. "Oh God, oh Jesus, make it stop!" Arthur's voice was no longer a whisper, it was a wet, guttural cry of pure agony. He arched his back off the mattress, his skeletal fingers clawing at the sheets, his legs kicking out in a futile attempt to escape the pain exploding inside him. "Arthur, I'm sorry, I'm so sorry." I scrambled toward him, panic seizing my chest. I had seen men shot. I had seen soldiers lose limbs to IEDs in the desert. I knew pain, but this was different. This was torture. His eyes were rolled back, showing only the whites, and his jaw was clenched so tight I thought his teeth would crack. "Michael, it's breaking, he sobbed, tears streaming horizontally towards his ears. "I've got you. I'm getting the medicine. Hang on, Dad, just hang on." I spun toward the nightstand. I knew the protocol. Hospice care meant having a comfort kit nearby for breakthrough pain. The small brown glass bottle of liquid morphine, Roxanol, was the only thing that could touch this level of suffering. 0. 5 million sublingual, every 4 hours as needed. I grabbed the bottle from beside the empty water pitcher. My hands were shaking, adrenaline flooding me, but my training kicked in. Assess, execute, alleviate. I gripped the cap to unscrew it, bracing to push down and turn, anticipating the child safety mechanism. But the cap spun freely. There was no resistance, no click, click, click of the safety seal. It was loose. I frowned, a prickle of unease at the back of my neck. Maybe Sharon had just left it loose after the last dose. It was careless, dangerous even. But in a crisis, people make mistakes. I pulled the dropper out of the vial. I froze. The liquid inside the glass pipette was clear, crystal clear. Morphine sulfate isn't usually invisible. It has a slight viscosity, a heaviness to it. Sometimes it's dyed blue or red depending on the pharmacy, but even the clear liquid has a syrupy texture. This dripped from the pipette quickly, like water. "Leah, please," Arthur moaned behind me, a sound of absolute misery. I brought the dropper to my nose. I expected the chemical medicinal bitterness of opioids. I expected the smell of a hospital. Instead, I smelled a swimming pool, chlorine. It was the unmistakable, sharp scent of treated municipal tap water, the same water that came out of the kitchen faucet downstairs. My stomach dropped so fast I felt dizzy. No, my mind rejected it. No, they wouldn't. Nobody is that evil. Not even them. I had to be sure. I had to be completely certain before I let this reality unhinge me. I squeezed a drop onto the tip of my finger and touched it to my tongue. Morphine is bitter. It's a taste that makes you pucker, a chemical assault that lingers. I tasted nothing, just cold, flat, chlorinated water. The bottle fell from my hand. It hit the carpet with a dull thud. It didn't break. It just rolled under the bed. They had stolen his medication. The realization hit me with the force of a gut punch. Sharon and Kevin hadn't just neglected him. They hadn't just forgotten to refill a prescription. They had deliberately emptied a bottle of Schedule II narcotics, the medication that was the only barrier between a dying man and hell, and filled it with tap water. Why? To save the $50 copay, to sell the pills on the street to pay for the cruise, or just because they hated him enough to let him suffer. Make it stop. Arthur groaned, his voice growing weaker, his energy spent. He was curling into a ball again, shivering, defeated by the pain. I looked at the empty space on the nightstand where the medicine should have been. I looked at the man writhing on the bed. This was a crime scene. This wasn't just bad family dynamics. This was torture. They had looked at this man, a man who had worked for 30 years to put a roof over their heads, a veteran who had served his country, and decided his pain was less important than their vacation. They had looked him in the eye, given him a dropper of water, and told him it was medicine. They had set a dying man on fire while his bones were shattering from the inside out. I remembered Sharon's voice from last Thanksgiving dinner, shrill and self-righteous, lecturing over the turkey. Honor thy father and thy mother. She had sermonized when Michael had missed a Sunday call. It's the first commandment with a promise, Leah. You military types, you forget God's laws. Honor thy father. She was honoring him with water while she drank martinis on his grave. A cold, dark calm washed over me. The shaking in my hands stopped. The panic receded. I went back to the bed. I couldn't give him morphine. I didn't have any, but I could give him warmth. I could give him comfort. I climbed onto the bed, boots and all. I didn't care about the filth. I put my arms around Arthur. I wrapped my body around his frail frame, pulling him close, sharing every ounce of body heat I had. I pulled the blankets over both of us, creating a cocoon against the freezing room. I've got you, Dad, I whispered in his ear, rocking him gently. I'm so sorry. The medicine. We're out. But I'm here. I'm not leaving. Just focus on my voice. He buried his face in my jacket, clutching my sleeve with a desperate strength. He cried soft, broken sobs that vibrated against my chest. I stared out into the dark of the room, my eyes wide open and dry. I wasn't crying anymore. I was done crying. I pictured Sharon's face. I pictured Kevin's smirk. I pictured them laughing on that boat, clinking glasses, thinking they'd gotten away with the perfect crime. They thought Michael's death had left Arthur helpless. They thought I was just some broken, grieving widow who would come back and clean up their mess. They forgot who I was. They forgot that before I was a wife, before I was a widow, I was a soldier. I was trained to identify threats. I was trained to eliminate them. I stroked Arthur's thin white hair as his breathing finally started to hitch and slow, exhaustion overpowering the pain. I swear to you, Arthur, I whispered into the darkness, a promise to him and to the ghost of my husband. I swear on Michael's life, they will not get away with this. I'm not just going to sue them. I'm not just going to yell at them. I clenched my jaw until it ached. I am going to destroy them. I am going to take everything from them, piece by piece, until they have nothing left but the clothes on their back and the shame in their souls. I will be their karma. Why? The question formed in my mind, screaming for an answer. Why could human beings be so cruel? As if hearing my silent question, Arthur stirred in my arms. His breathing changed. He wasn't asleep. He was awake and suddenly, strangely, calm. He moved his hand, tapping my arm weakly, signaling me to release him. He had the answer, and it was hidden right underneath us. The room had settled into a heavy, suffocating silence after the chaos of the last hour. The only sound was the wind rattling the loose siding outside and the hum of the old refrigerator downstairs. I was still holding Arthur, my arms cramping from maintaining the embrace that kept him warm, my mind racing with plans for revenge that felt too big and violent for this small, freezing room. Then Arthur moved. It wasn't the restless, agonized twitching from before. It was deliberate. He pushed against my chest with a surprisingly solid force. I pulled back, looking down at his face, expecting to see the glazed, delirious look of pain again. But it wasn't there. His eyes were open, and for the first time since I'd arrived, the gray fog was gone. His pupils were sharp and focused. The yellow tinge of sickness was still there, but the man behind the eyes, the shrewd carpenter, the staff sergeant who had led men through the jungle, was back. It was terminal lucidity. I'd heard about it from army medics. The final surge, the burst of energy the brain releases just before the end, giving the dying a moment of absolute clarity to say their goodbyes, or, in Arthur's case, to give orders. "Leah," he said. His voice wasn't raspy anymore. It was low, but clear. "Under the bed, by the back left post." "Arthur, you need to rest," I whispered, pushing a stray lock of white hair from his forehead. "Do it." "Soldier," he commanded. It wasn't unkind. It was urgent. "There's a green metal ammo box. Get it out, now." I hesitated for a second, then nodded. I slid off the bed. My boots hit the cold floor. I crouched down, ignoring the smell of dust and sick, and peered into the darkness beneath the metal bed frame. There, shoved against the wall, hidden behind a stack of old National Geographic magazines and a pair of worn-out slippers, was a dull green steel box. It was a standard-issue military ammo can, the kind you find in army surplus stores, covered in a thick layer of gray dust. I pulled it out. It was much heavier than I expected. The metal scraped loudly against the floorboards. "Sharon always hated that box," Arthur said with a dry, humorless chuckle. "Called it my pile of junk. Kicked it every time she vacuumed, complained I was a hoarder. Never once tried to open it." I wiped the dust from the lid with my sleeve. The latch was stiff with rust. I got my thumb under the clamp and pushed hard. With a metallic screech, it popped open. I lifted the heavy lid. I was expecting to find old medals, maybe some letters from Vietnam, or maybe a coin collection. Instead, the box was packed to the brim with paper. Thick, creamy, high-quality paper that smelled of old libraries and ink. I reached in and pulled out the top sleeve. My eyes widened. It was a stock certificate, an original paper stock certificate from 1980. The logo at the top was a rainbow-colored apple with a bite taken out of it. Apple Computer Inc. I dug deeper. Underneath were more. Microsoft Corporation, 1986, Coca-Cola, Home Depot. "I was a carpenter, Leah," Arthur said, his voice steady from the bed. "But I listened. I worked on houses for rich folks in Philadelphia. I'd hear them talk. Back in the 80s, they all said computers were a fad. Sharon said I was throwing money away. She wanted new curtains, new cars. But every month I took a little from my paycheck and I bought paper." I looked at the number of shares on the Apple certificate. Then I did the mental math of 40 years of stock splits. 2 for 1, 7 for 1, 4 for 1. My hand started to shake again, but this time it wasn't with rage. It was with shock. "Arthur," I stammered, looking up at him. "Do you have any idea what this is worth?" He nodded slowly. "I stopped opening the statements 10 years ago when it hit 2 million. It's almost all in the reinvestment plan now." He pointed a trembling finger at a thick blue binder at the very bottom of the box. "Read that one. That's the important one." I pulled out the blue binder. Embossed in gold lettering on the front was the phrase, The Arthur Miller Revocable Living Trust. I flipped it open to the summary page, dated just 3 months ago. Total assets under management, $3, 250, 478 house, 19, $3, $2 million. I stared at the number. The zeros seemed to dance on the page. 3. $2 million sitting in a rusty box under a bed in a house where the heat was turned off to save money. Belonging to a man who was drinking tap water instead of painkillers because his wife didn't want to spend $50. She doesn't know, I whispered. It wasn't a question. Thinks I'm broke, Arthur said, a hard edge to his voice. Thinks all I have is my VA disability check. That's why she treats me like this. That's why she left. If she knew about this box, she'd be sitting in that chair right now, holding my hand, spoon-feeding me soup, just waiting for me to die so she could buy her yachts. He coughed, a wet, rattling sound that shook his whole frame, but he waved off my concern. He looked at me, his gaze intense. Michael knew, he said softly. The mention of my husband took my breath away. Michael knew. I showed him the box right before he deployed the last time, Arthur said, his eyes welling up with tears. He was worried about leaving you, worried about money. I told him, son, if I kick the bucket or if you don't come back, this goes to Leah. He made me promise. He said, bye, Dad, don't let Mom get it. She'll just waste it. Give it to Leah. She'll do the right thing. I clutched the binder to my chest, squeezing my eyes shut as the tears fell, hot and fast. Michael, even from the grave, he was looking out for me. He had kept this secret to protect me. This was the test, Leah. Arthur whispered. I wanted to see. I wanted to see if they'd take care of me because I was a husband and a father, or if they only cared about what they could get. Well, I got my answer tonight. He gestured to the empty nightstand where the water-filled morphine bottle had been. They failed, he said simply. They failed and they're fired. He held out his hand. Give me the binder. Look on the back. There's a card stapled to it. I handed it to him. He flipped it over and tapped a business card. Catherine Burke, estate attorney. You have to call her, Arthur commanded. My phone's in the top drawer. It's an old flip phone, but it works. Call her. Tell her it's a code red. She'll know what that means. Arthur, I asked, it's 3:00 in the morning. There's a blizzard outside. I don't have time, Leah, he snapped, urgency cracking his voice. I can feel it. The clock is ticking. If I die before I sign the amendment, Sharon gets everything. State law gives it to the spouse. She gets the $3 million, she gets the house. She'll be laughing at us forever. He grabbed my wrist. His strength was failing, but his will was iron. I need to sign the new will. I need to name you the sole beneficiary and trustee. I need to disinherit Sharon Miller and Kevin Miller completely. I want it done tonight, before the sun comes up. I looked at him. I saw the fire in his eyes. The last stand of an old soldier who refused to let the enemy win. I nodded. I reached into the drawer and pulled out his old, battered Samsung flip phone. I opened it. The keypad glowed green in the dark. I'm on it, Dad, I said. I dialed the number on the card. As the line started to ring, I looked at the ammo box full of millions, then at the freezing room, and finally, at the man who had played the long game and won. Hello, a groggy, irritated female voice answered on the third ring. Ms. Burke, I said, my voice firm. This is Sergeant Leah Carter. I'm calling for Arthur Miller. He says it's a code red. There was a pause on the other end, then the rustle of sheets and a sudden change in tone. I'm putting on my boots, Catherine Burke said. Keep him alive. I'll be there in 20 minutes. The headlights of the car sliced through the swirling snow outside the window, painting the dark walls of the study like searchlights. A moment later, the solid thud of a car door shutting echoed through the freezing house. Catherine Burke didn't knock. She had a key Arthur had given her years ago. She stomped the snow from her tall boots in the hallway and strode into the room, bringing a blast of cold air with her. She was exactly as Arthur had described her, a woman in her late 50s with steel gray hair cut in a no-nonsense bob, and she wore a wool overcoat that looked like it could stop a bullet. She didn't look like an ambulance-chasing lawyer. She looked like a lawyer who buries bodies. She took one look at Arthur shivering under the pile of coats, then at the visible breath coming from my mouth. Her eyes narrowed. She didn't say a word. She flipped open her leather briefcase on the nightstand, shoving the empty water pitcher aside with a clatter. "I need light," she said, her voice raspy from sleep but all business. I grabbed the floor lamp from the living room and plugged it in. Catherine set up her smartphone on a small tripod she pulled from her bag. "We're recording a video affidavit," she stated, adjusting the angle. "If we just sign the papers, Sharon will claim he was coerced or delirious. We need video proof that he is of sound mind. We need to make this bulletproof." She hit the record button. Arthur rallied. It was incredible to watch. He pushed himself upright, pulling his flannel pajama top straight. He looked into the lens with the intensity of a commander briefing his troops. "State your full name and the date," Catherine ordered. "Arthur James Miller, November 24th. "Do you understand the document you are about to sign?" "I do," Arthur said, his voice firm. "It is an amendment to my revocable living trust. I am removing Sharon Miller and Kevin Miller as beneficiaries. I am naming Leah Carter the sole trustee and beneficiary of all my assets, including the investment accounts and this property." "Are you doing this under duress?" Arthur looked away from the camera and at me. His gaze softened. "No. I'm doing this because she's the only one who stayed." Catherine nodded, placed the document on a clipboard, and held it steady for him. Arthur's hand trembled, but he gripped the pen like a weapon. He signed his name, Arthur J. Miller. Catherine pulled a heavy metal notary seal from her bag, pressed it into the paper next to his signature. K-thunk. The sound was heavy, final, and satisfying. It sounded like a gavel falling in a courtroom. It sounded like justice. "Done," Catherine said, packing her things with brisk efficiency. "The trust is amended. As of this moment, Sharon has no claim to the money. The house is yours. The stocks are yours." She paused at the door, buttoning her coat. She glanced at the empty morphine vial I had left on the nightstand. She picked it up, sniffed it, and her face tightened with disgust. "You hold on to that vial," she said, her voice grim. "That's not probate court, Leah. That's criminal court. See you when the snow lets up." And then she was gone. The red taillights of her Subaru Outback faded into the blizzard. We were alone again, but the dynamic had shifted. The air in the room no longer felt heavy with despair. It felt electric. We had the shield. Now we needed the sword. I looked at Arthur. He was fading again. The energy from the signing was draining away, but he pointed a shaky finger at his old flip phone on the table. "Get them," he whispered. I picked up the phone, but I didn't use his. I got my iPad out of my bag, the one device I hadn't smashed against the wall. I needed high-definition video. I needed to see their faces. In the Army, we called this psychological operations. You use the enemy's arrogance against them. You make them feel safe, superior, so they let their guard down and reveal their position. I sat in a corner of the room, angling the iPad so the background was just darkness. I opened the control center and hit the screen record button. A small red dot appeared in the top corner. I opened FaceTime and I called Sharon. It rang for a long time. Ring, ring, ring. Then, a blast of noise filled the quiet room. Steel drums, the clinking of glasses. Sharon's face filled the screen. She was flushed, sweaty, her eyeliner smeared. She was wearing a too-tight tropical print dress and holding a drink that looked like a fishbowl. "What?" she yelled over the music, barely looking at the camera. "Leah, are you crazy? It's 3:00 in the morning there. You better not be calling to complain about the heat." I let my shoulders slump. I widened my eyes. I pitched my voice up, making it sound weak and panicked. "Mom, please," I stammered. "It's Arthur. He's in so much pain. He's screaming. Mom, I don't know what to do." Sharon rolled her eyes and took a long slurp of her drink. "He's always in pain. He's dying, Leah. That's what happens. Put in some earplugs." "I gave him the medicine," I cried, letting a tear slip out. It wasn't hard. I just had to channel the rage. "I gave him the dropper full, but it's not working. It's not doing anything. I think the bottle's gone bad. I think I need to call 911. I need an ambulance." "No." The reaction was instant. Sharon practically lunged at the phone. Do not call an ambulance. Do you have any idea what that costs? We are not paying for an ambulance ride just for them to tell him he's dying. Then the screen shifted. Ashley pushed her way into the frame. She looked even worse than Sharon, her eyes glassy and unfocused. She was wearing a tiara that said, Cruise Queen. Oh my God, stop being so dramatic, Ashley slurred, snatching the phone from Sharon. The medicine's not bad, you idiot. I held my breath. Then why isn't it working? Ashley, he's in agony. It's like I'm giving him water. Ashley laughed, a cruel, hiccuping laugh. Duh. She smirked, pleased with herself. That stuff costs like $50 for a copay, and Kevin needed money for the casino deposit. So, we stretched it. You stretched it, I repeated, making sure the microphone caught every syllable. You diluted it. Well, Ashley said, annoyed that I was ruining her vibe. We dumped it out and filled it with tap water. It's the placebo effect. If he thinks it's medicine, he'll feel better. Just tell him to man up and stop ruining our vacation. God, you're such a downer. She looked at someone off screen. Kevin, your sister-in-law is crying about the water medicine. Kevin's voice came from the background, dismissive and distant. Hang up on her. I'm on a winning streak. I stared at the screen. I looked at Ashley's smug, vacant face. I looked at Sharon, who was busy trying to order another round of drinks from a bartender behind her. They had confessed. They had admitted to grand larceny, elder abuse, and medical tampering. And they'd done it wearing a plastic tiara. The red dot in the corner of my iPad blinked steadily on. Recording, recording, recording. I sat up straight. I wiped the fake tear from my cheek. The panic vanished from my face, replaced by the cold, hard stare of a soldier who had just acquired the target. Thank you, Ashley, I said. My voice dropped an octave. It was flat, calm, and dangerous. Ashley blinked, confused by the sudden change in tone. What? That was all I needed, I said. Enjoy the cruise. It'll be your last vacation. I didn't wait for a reply. I hit the red button, stop recording. The video saved to photos. The connection was cut. The room was silent again. The trap had just snapped shut. If you would have recorded that call to expose them, hit like right now, and comment guilty below if you're ready to see them pay for what they did. I looked over at the bed. Arthur was watching me. He had heard everything. He didn't look sad anymore. He looked satisfied. You got him, he whispered. I got him, Dad, I said, moving closer to him. We got him. He let out a long, slow breath, and his eyes drifted to the window where the first hint of gray light was beginning to touch the snow. Good, he murmured, his voice barely audible. Good, now I'm tired, Leah. I'm so tired. The blizzard outside had finally subsided, leaving behind a silence so profound it felt heavy. Inside the house, the air was still frigid, but the atmosphere had changed. It wasn't just a cold house anymore. It was a waiting room for the inevitable. Arthur was awake, but barely. The burst of energy he had found to sign the trust documents had burned through his reserves like a flare, leaving him dim and faltering. I'm hungry, he whispered, licking his dry, cracked lips. I went to the kitchen. The cupboards were bare. Sharon and Kevin had taken everything of value or substance before they left. No pasta, no soup, not even a box of crackers. But in the back of the pantry, hidden behind a box of stale tea bags, I found a can of Del Monte sliced peaches and heavy syrup. I opened it. The metallic pop of the tab echoed in the empty kitchen. I didn't have a bowl, so I just got a spoon and carried the can back to the study. I sat on the edge of the bed and fed him one slice at a time. The syrup dripped from the spoon, golden and sweet. Peach pie, Arthur mumbled, closing his eyes in pleasure as he swallowed, just like the one you made for the 4th of July. They were just cold, canned peaches. But I smiled, holding back tears. Yeah, Dad, it's my special recipe. He ate 3 slices and then turned his head away. He was done. He stared at the ceiling, his gaze unfocused, drifting in time. I taught him how to ride a bike, he whispered. Who? I asked gently, wiping his chin. Michael. He was 6. Sharon was screaming. Said he'd break his neck. I took off the training wheels. A faint, ghostly smile touched his lips. He fell, scraped his knee down to the bone, blood everywhere. He didn't cry, just looked up at me and said, "Put me back on, Dad." Arthur turned his head to look at me. His gray eyes were shining with a liquid light. "He was stubborn like you. That's why he loved you, Leah. You don't stay down." "You don't either," I said, my voice thick. "I'm tired, honey," he breathed, the air rattling in his chest. "I think I'm ready to get off the bike now." I nodded, squeezing his hand. "It's okay, you can let go. Michael's waiting." The change happened around 3:00 p.m. The rhythm of his breathing changed. It became the sound that every soldier and every nurse knows, the Cheney-Stokes respiration. Long, deep breaths, followed by terrifying pauses of silence. Inhale, exhale, silence. Silence. Inhale. I didn't call 911. I didn't panic. I just climbed onto the bed beside him, sitting cross-legged, holding his hand in both of mine. The room was freezing, but I felt a strange warmth radiating from him, as if his soul was burning brightly one last time before it left. I started to hum. My voice was shaky at first, but it found its strength in the dimness. Amazing grace. How sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I sang the song he had requested for his funeral years ago when we'd joke about death over Sunday dinners. I sang it to quiet the wind. I sang it to guide him home. I once was lost, but now I'm found. Was blind, but now I see. Arthur took one last long breath. His body shuddered, a final release of pain and burden, and then he didn't breathe again. The silence that followed was deafening. It was louder than the storm, louder than the screams I'd heard in my head earlier. It was the absolute, final silence of a completed life. I waited a minute, then two. Then I reached out and gently closed his eyes. They weren't gray anymore. They were just empty. The man who had raised my husband, the man who had saved my future tonight, was gone. I didn't scream. I didn't keen. The grief was there, a crushing weight in my chest, but it was solid and hard like a stone. I couldn't afford to fall apart. Not yet. I stood up, kissed his forehead. It was already cooling. "Goodbye, Dad," I whispered. Then I went to my duffel bag in the hall. I unzipped it. Inside, wrapped in plastic, were my dress blues, my army uniform. I had brought it because I'd planned to visit Michael's grave on Veterans Day. Now it would serve a different purpose. I stripped out of my civilian clothes, the jeans and sweater that smelled of travel and stress. I pulled on the crisp white shirt. I buttoned the dark blue jacket. I adjusted the gold stripe on the trousers. I pinned my ribbons to my chest. I pulled my hair back into a regulation bun. I looked at myself in the mirror. I didn't see a grieving widow. I saw a sergeant. I saw a soldier preparing for war. I went back into the study. I stood at the foot of the bed, my spine rigid, my heels together. I brought my right hand up in a slow, sharp salute. I held it for a long 3 count, staring at the still form under the blanket. "Mission complete, sir," I said into the quiet room. "You are relieved of duty. I have the watch." I lowered my hand. Then I picked up the phone and I called the funeral home. Mr. Davison arrived an hour later, just as the sun was turning a pale, bruised purple over the snowy horizon. He came with 2 assistants and a gurney. They were respectful, quiet, moving with the practiced grace of those who deal with death daily. As they secured Arthur to the gurney and covered him with a velvet quilt, Mr. Davison turned to me with a clipboard. "Mrs. Carter," he said softly, "I assume Mrs. Miller will be handling the arrangements. Sharon will want to plan a viewing, a chapel service. We usually do a 3-day wake for veterans." I looked at him. I was standing by the fireplace. The brass buttons on my uniform caught the dawning light. "No," I said. Mr. Davison blinked. "I'm sorry?" "There will be no viewing, no wake, and no funeral service," I said, my voice leaving no room for argument. "I am the executor and the next of kin, per the medical directive and the trust signed this morning." I handed him the documents Catherine had left. "I want a direct cremation," I instructed. "Immediately. I want his ashes in an urn and returned to me by Thursday. But the rest of the family, he hesitated. Mrs. Miller may want to say goodbye. I looked at the empty space on the floor where I had found Arthur lying in his own waste just hours ago. Mrs. Miller had months to say goodbye, I said coldly. She chose a cruise instead. She doesn't get to come back here and cry over a casket she didn't pay for. She doesn't get to perform her grief for the neighbors. Mr. Davison looked at my uniform, then at the steel in my eyes. He nodded slowly. Understood, Sergeant. We'll take good care of him. They wheeled Arthur out into the morning cold. The front door clicked shut. I was alone in the house. I didn't take off my uniform. I went into the living room and sat in the armchair facing the front door. The house was legally mine, but the home was gone. I looked at the calendar on the wall. Thanksgiving was in 2 days. They would be back then, tan and happy, expecting to find a dead old man and a submissive daughter-in-law waiting to clean up their mess. I crossed my legs, smoothing the crease in my trousers, let them come. I wasn't going anywhere. The dining room table was set for Thanksgiving, but there was no turkey, no stuffing, no cranberry sauce, no pumpkin pie cooling on the sideboard. The air didn't smell of sage and roasting meat. It smelled of lemon polish and cold, hard justice. I sat at the head of the table, my back rigid against the high-backed oak chair. I was wearing my full dress blue uniform. The gold stripes on my trousers reflected the weak winter light filtering through the sheer curtains. My ribbons were perfectly aligned on my chest, a colorful testament to discipline and service. In the center of the table, sitting on the lace runner Sharon loved so much, were 2 objects. On the left was a heavy, tightly sealed bronze urn. Arthur. On the right was Michael's Sig Sauer P320 service pistol. The magazine was removed. The slide was locked back, the chamber empty. It wasn't there to be used. It was there to make a point. It represented the protection they had lost. To my right sat Catherine Burke, dressed in a sharp charcoal suit, her briefcase open, a stack of documents arranged with surgical precision in front of her. We waited. At 1:15 p.m., a taxi pulled into the driveway. Car doors slammed. A laugh carried through the window. A loud, vacation-drunk laugh. I'm just saying, if the old man croaked, we can finally turn that study into a movie room. I heard Kevin's voice, followed by Ashley's giggle. The front door burst open. A gust of wind blew in, carrying the scent of stale airplane air and coconut sunscreen. "Honey, we're home," Sharon yelled, dropping her bags in the foyer. "God, it's freezing in here. Leah, did you forget to pay the gas bill? And where's the turkey? I'm starving." They spilled into the dining room, a chaotic whirlwind of sunburns, duty-free liquor bags, and shopping bags from a pre-Black Friday sale. They looked ridiculous in shorts and flip-flops in a Pennsylvania November, shivering, but trying to look tan and wealthy. They stopped dead when they saw us. Sharon froze, her gaze jumping from my uniform to the lawyer, finally landing on the urn in the center of the table. "What is this?" she asked, the fake cheer gone from her voice. "Why are you in costume, and who is she?" "I am Catherine Burke, Arthur's attorney," Catherine said, her voice calm and authoritative. "And that," I pointed to the urn, "is your husband." Sharon blinked, glanced at the urn, then shrugged and plopped into a chair. So he finally let go. Well, God rest his soul, it's for the best. He was suffering. She looked around. "Is that why there's no food? Seriously, Leah, you couldn't throw a ham in the oven?" Ashley and Kevin sat down, looking bored. Kevin picked up an apple from the fruit bowl, ignoring the effigy of the man who raised him. "We need to discuss the estate," Catherine said, breaking the silence. "Mr. Miller left specific instructions to have this meeting immediately upon your return." Sharon perked up. Greed instantly replaced indifference. "Estate, you mean the insurance? Did the VA send a check?" Catherine adjusted her glasses. "I am referring to Mr. Miller's investment portfolio, the Arthur Miller Revocable Living Trust." Sharon frowned. "Portfolio? Arthur didn't have a portfolio. He had a toolbox and a bad back." Catherine picked up a document. Mr. Miller was an early investor in Apple, Microsoft, and other blue-chip stocks, beginning in 1980. He reinvested all dividends for 40 years. She paused for effect. "The current value of the trust is $3,240,000. The silence that followed was absolute. You could hear the wind outside. Sharon's jaw dropped. Her eyes went wide. Kevin dropped his apple. Ashley gasped, sitting up straight. "3 million," Sharon whispered. Then a shriek of pure, unadulterated joy escaped her throat. "I knew it! I knew that cheap old bastard was hiding something from me." She leaped up, grabbing Kevin by the shoulders. "We're rich, Kevin! Honey, we're rich! We can buy the beach house, we can get the boat." She turned to me, her face flushed with victory. "See, Leah, I told you staying was worth it. $3 million. She reached for the stack of papers in front of Catherine. "Give me the checkbook. I need to transfer this before the banks close." "Sit down, Mrs. Miller," Catherine said. Her voice was like a whip. Sharon paused. "Excuse me?" "I haven't finished reading the disposition of assets," Catherine said coolly. "What's to read?" Sharon laughed, a high, manic sound. "I'm his wife. It's community property. It's mine." "It's in a living trust," Catherine corrected. "Trust assets avoid probate. They belong to the named beneficiary." She looked down at the paper. "The sole beneficiary of the trust, including all cash, stocks, and this real estate, is Leah Carter." The room seemed to tilt. Sharon's smile froze, then slowly disintegrated into a mask of confusion and horror. "What?" she whispered. "Mrs. Miller, Kevin, Ashley, your share of the inheritance is 0. Catherine continued, reading from the amendment Arthur had signed in the dark. "Furthermore, you are hereby served with an eviction notice. You have 24 hours to vacate the property." "Liar!" Sharon lunged across the table, her face contorted into a demonic sneer. "You forged it. You manipulated him. He was senile. I'll sue you. I'll take you to court and I'll bury you." She reached for me, her nails like claws aimed at my face. I didn't flinch. I just glanced at the pistol on the table. Sharon followed my gaze. She stopped, gasping. Her chest heaved. The sight of the gun, Michael's gun, arrested her violence. "This isn't over," she hissed, backing away. "This is a civil matter. I'll get a lawyer. I'll prove incompetence. You won't see a dime." "You're right, Sharon," I said, standing up slowly. I picked up my iPad from the table. "The money is a civil matter, but this," I said, holding up the device, "is a criminal matter." I hit play, turned the volume all the way up. The sound of steel drums and laughter filled the quiet dining room, and then Ashley's voice, loud and clear, slurring from alcohol and arrogance. "We diluted it. Well, we dumped it out and filled it with tap water. Just tell him to man up." Sharon's face went pale. Not just pale, sheet white, deathly. Ashley let out a choked squeak, her hands flying to her mouth. Kevin looked like he was going to be sick. "That's," Sharon stammered, her voice shaking. "That's out of context. It's a joke. We were joking." "Elder abuse isn't a joke," I said, my voice low and dangerous. "Medical tampering isn't a joke. Stealing SGLI money isn't a joke, and neither is involuntary manslaughter." I leaned across the table, staring into her terrified eyes. "You killed him, Sharon. You took away his pain medication and let his heart give out from the shock of the agony. That's homicide." "No," she whispered, backing into the sideboard. "No, we didn't. You can't prove it." Thump. Thump. The sound came from the front hall, short, sharp, and undeniable. Blue and red lights washed through the sheer curtains, painting the dining room walls in police colors. "I didn't just call a lawyer, Sharon," I said, picking up the urn and holding it to my chest like a shield. "I called the district attorney." Heavy footsteps sounded on the porch. The front door, which they had left open in their excitement, framed 2 uniformed officers and a detective. "Sharon Miller?" the detective asked, walking into the room. He held up a pair of handcuffs. "You have the right to remain silent." I looked at them, the sunburned, terrified family who had gone on a cruise to celebrate my husband's death. "Happy Thanksgiving," I said. The metallic click of the handcuffs tightening around Sharon's wrists was the sweetest sound I had ever heard. It was better than music. It was the sound of consequences finally catching up to a woman who thought she could outrun them forever. "Ow, you're hurting me! Do you know who I am?" Sharon shrieked, twisting in her body as the officer turned her to face the wall. Her tropical dress was wrinkled, and her spray tan looked orange and patchy under the harsh dining room light. I am a grieving widow. My husband just died. You can't arrest a widow on Thanksgiving. You're being arrested for elder abuse resulting in death, grand larceny, and tampering with a scheduled narcotic, the detective recited in a bored, practiced voice. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you. Leah! Sharon screamed, wrenching her head around to face me. Her eyes were wild, unhinged with a mixture of terror and narcissistic rage. Tell them to stop. I'm your mother-in-law. I gave birth to Michael. I raised the man you married. How dare you? How dare you call the police on your family? She was playing the only card she had left, the biology card. She thought because she'd pushed Michael out 30 years ago, she had a free pass to murder his father. I walked over to her today. I didn't yell. I didn't lose my temper. I just looked at her with the same detached clinical interest one might have for a specimen in a jar. You gave birth to Michael, I said. My voice cut through her hysterics. That's biology. But Arthur raised him. Arthur loved him. And you killed him. I didn't kill him, she spat, spittle flying from her lips. He was sick. He was going to die anyway. You swapped his painkillers for tap water, I said. You tortured him to save $50. That's not sickness, Sharon. That's evil. And now you're going to die in prison. Michael would be ashamed to share DNA with you. Her face crumpled for the first time. The reality hit her. She wasn't going to the beach house. She wasn't going to the mall. She was going to a cell. She let out a choked sound like a siren, and her knees buckled as the officer pulled her toward the door. That left the lovebirds. Kevin was standing by the sideboard, his face pale and green. He looked like a little boy caught stealing from the cookie jar, only the jar was a $3 million trust fund. He looked at the officers approaching. Then he looked at Ashley. Babe, he stammered, holding out a shaking hand to her. Babe, tell them I just did what Mom said. We were just borrowing the money, right? Ashley took a step back. Her eyes darted between Kevin, the handcuffs, and the grim-faced detective. You could almost see the gears turning in her head. She was calculating the return on investment of this relationship. The stock had just crashed to zero. Don't touch me, Ashley said. Her voice wasn't slurred anymore. It was sharp and sober. Ashley? Kevin blinked, confused. What are you doing? We need to call a lawyer together. Ashley let out a sharp, incredulous laugh. There is no we, Kevin. You told me you were rich. You told me the insurance money was yours. You lied to me. She turned to the detective, her hands raised in a gesture of innocence. Officer, I didn't know anything about the medicine. I swear I just went on the trip because I was invited. I'm a victim here too. He manipulated me. Ashley, Kevin gasped. The betrayal hit him harder than the handcuffs. You were the one who poured the water in the bottle. You made the joke about the placebo effect. Liar! Ashley shrieked. She stepped forward and slapped Kevin across the face. Thwack! It was a solid hit. Kevin's head snapped back. You are a broke, pathetic loser, she screamed, grabbing her Gucci purse, the one bought with Michael's blood money, and clutching it tight. I am breaking up with you. Don't call me. Don't write me from jail. We are over. She spun on her heel and marched for the door, pushing past the officers. I'm leaving. I'm not an accessory. I'm single. And just like that, the love of his life was gone, scurrying away like a rat fleeing a sinking ship, taking the stolen purse with her. Kevin just stood there, a red handprint blooming on his cheek as the second officer clamped a wrist behind his back. The arrogance he'd shown an hour ago when he was joking about turning Arthur's death room into a media center had evaporated. He was completely stripped bare. He was nothing but a 30-year-old boy who had never once stood on his own 2 feet. The officer pushed him forward. As he passed me, his legs gave out. He fell to his knees right in front of me. The hardwood floor cracked with the impact. He looked up at me. His eyes were wet and his nose was running. He looked pathetic. He looked exactly like the little brother Michael used to complain about, the one who always broke things and expected everyone else to fix them. Leah, please, he sobbed, snot running over his lip. Please, don't let them take me. I'm scared. I can't go to jail. I'm not like you. I'm not tough. I looked down at him. I felt nothing. No pity, no rage, just a vast, empty disgust. You should have thought of that before you stole $400 of $400, I said. He lunged on his knees, trying to grab the hem of my pants, but the officer yanked him back. Leah, he babbled, using the nickname Michael used to call me because I blushed easily. He was trying to manipulate me. He was trying to invoke the ghost of his brother to save him. Do it for Michael, please. Michael loved me. He wouldn't want his little brother to go to jail. He wouldn't want me to be homeless. Leah, please, for Michael. The air in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. I crouched down. I got right in his face, so close he could see the reflection of his own pathetic fear in my eyes. Don't you ever speak his name again, I whispered. My voice was low, terrifyingly quiet. You stole his death gratuity. You let his father die in agony while you played games. You dishonored everything he stood for. I stood up, towering over him in my dress uniform, looking like the judgment day he never believed would come. You're right, Kevin. Michael wouldn't want you to be homeless, I said. And you won't be. You'll have a roof over your head, 3 meals a day, and a metal toilet for the next 10 to 15 years. I looked at the officer. Get him out of my house. Leah, no. Michael would save me. Kevin shrieked as they hauled him to his feet and dragged him toward the door. If Michael were alive, I called after him, my voice steady, he'd be the one putting the cuffs on you. The door slammed shut. The screaming stopped. The house went silent. The dining room was empty, save for the scattered bags of cheap souvenirs and the urn on the table. The parasites were gone. The infection had been cleared. I looked at the mess they had left behind, the overturned chair, the muddy footprints, the spilled fruit. It was a disaster. But for the first time in 8 months, the air in the house didn't smell like rot. It smelled clean. It smelled like winter. It smelled like freedom. The blizzard had finally broken. I stepped out onto the porch, squinting against the blinding morning sun reflecting off 2 feet of fresh, untouched snow. The world was quiet, save for the rhythmic, distant scrape of a county snowplow clearing the main road down the hill. The air was crisp and clean, sharp enough to sting your nose. But it felt good. It felt like the first real breath I'd taken in 8 months. I had packed my life into the back of my Ford F-150 in under an hour. I didn't take much: my duffel bag, my uniform, a few pictures of Michael, and the bronze urn containing Arthur's ashes, now buckled securely into the passenger seat. The house behind me, the Victorian farmhouse Sharon had prized so much, the place where Arthur had withered in the dark, wasn't a home anymore. It was just a structure, a shell of wood and siding that belonged to the trust, a financial asset to be liquidated. I had already called a realtor. It would go on the market on Monday. I walked down the driveway, the satisfying crunch of my boots on the packed snow. At the end of the drive, a sheriff's cruiser was idling, its exhaust puffing white clouds into the blue sky. The roads had been impassable during the height of the storm last night, so the deputies had to wait for the plows to come through before they could transport Sharon and Kevin to the county jail. They were bringing them out now. Sharon came first, flanked by a female deputy. She wasn't screaming anymore. The fight had gone out of her, leaving her looking old and small. Without her makeup, her jewelry, without the arrogance that fueled her, she looked like a ghost. She didn't even look at me as they guided her into the back of the cruiser. She was already gone, lost in the reality of what was coming. Then came Kevin. He was shivering in his tropical shorts and a thin hoodie the police had thrown over his shoulders. His hands were cuffed in front of him. He looked miserable. His nose red and running, his eyes scanning the ground as if looking for a way out. I stopped by the back door of my truck. I looked down at my left hand. My gold wedding band glittered in the sunlight. It was a simple ring, one Michael and I had picked out together at a pawn shop near the base because we were young and broke. For years, I had looked at it and felt love. But lately, since Michael died and I was left alone with his family, the ring had started to feel heavy. It felt like a shackle, binding me to the Miller name, binding me to Sharon's cruelty and Kevin's greed. Michael wasn't in that ring. Michael was in my heart. Michael was in the memories of late-night road trips and quiet mornings. This piece of metal was just a connection to the people who had dishonored him. I twisted the ring off my finger. It left a pale band of skin where it had been for 7 years. I held it up, letting the sun catch the gold one last time. "Hey, Kevin," I said. My voice wasn't loud, but in the crisp morning air, it carried perfectly. He looked up, his eyes widening as he saw the gold between my fingers. "You wanted Michael's money so badly," I asked. "You can have this." I flicked my wrist. The ring arced through the air, spinning in the sunlight, and landed with a soft plink in a bank of snow near the edge of the driveway, right next to a patch of yellow slush. Kevin's reaction was instinctive. It was pathetic. He didn't gasp. He lunged. He actually lunged. He wrenched away from the deputy, throwing himself toward the snowbank, his cuffed hands digging frantically for the few $100s worth of gold buried in the ice. He slipped on the slick pavement and went down face first into the snow, scrabbling like a starving animal fighting for a crumb. "Get up!" the deputy barked, hauling him up by the back of his sweatshirt. "My God, kid, have some dignity." Kevin scrambled to his feet, covered in snow, shivering, his eyes still fixed on the spot where the ring had vanished. He looked at me, and for an instant, I saw the realization dawn. He had sacrificed his freedom, his family, and his future for nothing. He was going to jail, and he was doing it covered in slush, digging for fool's gold. I turned away. I didn't need to see him get in the car. That part of my life was over. I climbed into the driver's seat and slammed the door. The cab was warm. The engine hummed with a low, steady rumble. I looked at my right hand. On my ring finger, I wore a different ring. It was heavy, matte steel with the eagle, globe, and anchor engraved on it. Arthur's Marine Corps service ring. It was too big for me, so I had wrapped it with electrical tape, the way soldiers do in the field. I put my hand on the gear shift. I thought about the wire transfer I'd set up with Catherine Ross just an hour ago. $2 million. It was a life-changing amount of money. It was enough to buy a mansion, a fleet of cars, to disappear to an island and never work again. But that wasn't me. And that wasn't Arthur. I had kept half, about $1.6 million. Enough to make sure I never had to worry. Enough to maybe start a small business, or buy a cabin near a lake where I could fish and think. The other half, $1.6 million, was already gone. I had signed the papers to establish the Arthur and Michael Miller Memorial Fund. The money would go to the Wounded Warrior Project and the Fisher House Foundation. It would build ramps for disabled veterans. It would pay for therapy for soldiers with PTSD. It would provide housing for families whose loved ones were recovering in military hospitals. Sharon and Kevin had tried to use Arthur's money to buy handbags and cruises. Now that same money was going to save the lives of men and women who actually deserved it. It was the ultimate poetic justice. I put the truck in drive. "Ready, guys?" I asked, looking at the urn in the passenger seat and tapping the picture of Michael on my dashboard. I pulled out of the driveway, the wheels crunching on the snow. I didn't look in the rearview mirror, I didn't look at the house, I didn't look at the cruiser. I turned onto the main road, heading west toward Route 30. The road was clear and salted, a black ribbon of asphalt cutting through the white landscape stretching toward the horizon. Martin Luther King Jr. once said, "The arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice." He was right. Sometimes it bends slowly, sometimes it takes years, sometimes it feels like it's breaking. But if you hold the line, if you fight for what's right, eventually it swings back around. I rolled down the window, letting the cold wind burn my cheeks and fill my lungs. I took a deep breath. The nightmare was over. The winter was ending. "Michael, Arthur," I whispered to the wind, "rest easy. You can stand down now. I have the watch from here." I pressed down on the accelerator, and for the first time in a long time, I wasn't running away. I was driving toward my life. Looking back on my journey, I realized the hardest pill to swallow wasn't the stolen money. It was the betrayal from the people I considered family. I used to believe that family meant staying and toughing it out, no matter how toxic the situation got. But I learned the hard way that family is a title earned through love and care, not a birthright. Setting those boundaries wasn't an act of hate toward them. It was the highest expression of self-love. I realized that if I kept opening the door for those who hurt me, I was just handing them the weapon. Walking away was the bravest thing I did to save my own life. Now I want to turn this over to you. Have you ever felt trapped by a sense of duty to family members who only drain you? Or have you found the courage, like I did, to finally cut those ties and choose your own peace? Please keep watching and share your story in the comments. I read them, and I want to know I'm not alone in this. If seeing justice finally served gave you the relief you needed today, hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Let's stand together.